Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Revenge Honeymoon by K.J. Gillenwater, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, The Idea is Born. Emily Small grimaced as she listened to this person on the other end of the bride's cell phone. She'd been assigned to manage it while her best friend in the whole world, Ruby Madison Evers, planned to marry the love of her life, Tyler James Hardy. The perfect couple, the most beautiful couple. Better looking than Brad and Angelina. They were going to have the most gorgeous brown-eyed curly-haired babies ever. So how was Emily going to tell Ruby the truth? As she set down the phone, her hand shook. Across the choir room, converted into a bride's dressing room, Ruby lifted the skirts of her Monique Lhuillier knockoff gown, rested one dainty foot on a chair, and slid a lacy garter up her thigh. "What is it, Em?" Ruby asked, her cheeks pink with excitement and professionally applied blush. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Those words hit her like a punch to the gut, exactly like Emily's older brother Hunter used to do when they were kids. Sacco, blammo, punch! She wished with all her might she could be at her childhood home in Roanoke, Virginia, plucking a lime popsicle out of the freezer to soothe her pain and her wounded psyche. "Em?" The bride waved off her two bridesmaids, cousins on her father's side and eager to be part of the Ruby wedding spectacular, and switched over to her maid of honor. "You're worrying me. Is it the caterer or maybe the DJ? I forgot to check in with them this morning, and I really should have double-checked they knew the address." Ruby's gleaming auburn hair had been twisted into the perfect Rapunzel braid, which lay artfully across one shoulder. The stylist had secured her Bruges lace veil with a diamond-encrusted comb supplied by her mother and worn by several generations of Madison women before her. She fluttered her thick yet false eyelashes, maybe not used to their weight and view obscuring tendencies. Emily's only positive thought before she broke the worst news of Ruby's life: at least she won't have mascara running down her face. That was Tyler, she gulped, her mouth so dry she wished she had a bucket full of water to drink. "He's not coming." Her voice dropped to a bare whisper. The cousins gasped and clutched one another in horror. The makeup artist, who had been waiting to do final touch-ups, packed up her case in a flash and squeaked out of the room without a word. Ruby's eyes widened, her mouth formed an O, and her body vibrated a fine tremor. Oh no, was he in an accident? I told him not to drive himself. I've read so many stories about brides and grooms getting in accidents on the way to the church. Nerves, they said. Should I go to him? Where is he? Was he driving his father's car or the rental? Oh, I hope he wasn't driving the rental. We have to make it to our suite at the Hilton tonight, and I really don't want to take an Uber or have my father drive. Oh, that would be so embarrassing. Ruby. Emily grasped her friend's arm, the fine Mikado silk cool under her fingers. A long-sleeved dress for a late fall wedding maybe was too warm for the Tampa location, but it had been so gorgeous on her friend's slender body there had been no other choice at the bridal boutique. He's calling off the wedding. Nausea soured Emily's stomach. Why did she have to be the one who picked up the phone? One of the cousins burst into tears. Ruby stood stock still in the middle of the bride's dressing room. But Rhonda Madison Evers entered wearing a royal blue mother of the bride dress covered in sequins. "My darling, the makeup artist told me the news. How could that man be so cruel?" She curved her arms around her only daughter. "Mom, I don't understand. How could he not be coming?" Ruby crumpled to the floor. "You'll crush your dress," Mrs. Evers gasped and knelt beside her. She yanked at her daughter's arm as if her will alone would lift up the 125-pound woman and her 10 pounds of underskirts and heavy fabric. "We can still return it." "No, we can't. It's been altered," the bride spoke in a monotone. "Well," said Mrs. Evers, "there's always eBay or Craigslist, I suppose." "Facebook Marketplace is better," mumbled a cousin. Mrs. Evers shot daggers in the woman's direction. "I need to talk to him." The bride snapped her fingers at Emily. "Get Tyler on the phone. I will just demand that he come." Emily gulped and bit at her lower lip, then got up the courage to tell her best friend since grade school the worst thing a best friend could say. "Tyler doesn't want to get married. Do you really want to force a man to marry you, Rubes?" "But he promised me. He gave me this ring." Ruby held out her hand for the cousins, her mother, Emily, and now the florist who'd arrived with her wedding bouquet. A gorgeous pear-shaped 2.5-carat diamond decorated her left ring finger. Would he have given me this ring if he didn't want to marry me? He doesn't want to marry you, Rubes. Emily knelt and put an arm around her friend. The bride sagged against her. The florist quietly set the bridal bouquet on his chair and scrambled for the door. Emily led Ruby to an empty chair, and her mother sat beside her. Oh, he's an awful man, a terrible, mean, awful man. Who would do that to my little girl? Mrs. Evers took her daughter by the hand and gripped it tightly. Ow, Mother, that hurts. Ruby pulled her hand out of her mother's grasp and began to nibble on her freshly manicured nails. What do we do about the guests? Your father's telling them now, Mrs. Evers reassured her. What will we do about the reception? Ruby pulled the veil out of her hair. We're inviting everyone to meet us over there, her mother answered. We've already paid for the hall, the food, the entertainment. We might as well have a party, don't you think, darling? What will we do about the honeymoon? Ruby kicked off her satin heels and rubbed her toes. Well, I guess you'll have to cancel, sighed Mrs. Evers. Maybe they'll give you credit. No, wait, I have a better idea, said Emily. And that's when the revenge honeymoon took shape, that very moment, and Emily Small's life would never be the same. As the taxi pulled up to the cruise terminal in Tampa, Emily smiled. She'd always wanted to try out a cruise. It had sounded so exotic, so luxurious, but she'd never had someone who wanted to go with her. And who takes a cruise alone? I can't do this, Ruby cringed in the back seat. Her perfect but caked bride makeup had been washed away last night in the Hilton honeymoon suite the two had shared, and had been replaced this morning with a simple black mascara, nude lipstick, and a pinch of blush. She wore a blue sundress with a flared skirt, and a wide-brimmed straw hat sat in her lap. I'll look like a fool. Everyone will be wondering. Wondering what? Emily had her mind on the miracle FedEx who'd shipped her passport overnight. Thank goodness her mother knew exactly where she kept it. Bottom drawer of her old dresser next to her tax returns. She'd never complain again about her nosy mother, what a nosy mother she had. Ever. Well, okay, maybe she would. But not today. Today she was her best friend's rock. The solid thing she could rely on after her terrible, awful, no good, but very attractive fiancé left her at the altar. Emily was dependable. Emily was loyal. Emily was beginning to sound like Ruby's pet dog. This is a honeymoon cruise for couples only, Ruby said with as much sympathetic whining as she could muster. You know, just married type couples. I seem to recall you mentioned that when you booked it last spring. Emily checked her appearance in a compact she kept in her purse. At least on a honeymoon cruise full of couples in love, no one would be fawning all over Ruby and ignoring her plain Jane best friend. Years ago, Emily had learned her limitations when sitting next to her model-like bestie. And Ruby had gotten engaged to Tyler on Valentine's Day 9 months ago. Emily secretly hoped it would be her time to shine. Ruby was sweet and kind and truly didn't realize how naturally gorgeous she was, so it was hard to be mad at her, hard to be jealous of her, hard to be anything but appreciative of what a wonderful friend she could be. There will be all of these newlyweds in love all around us. Ruby leaned forward to talk to the taxi driver. How much to take us to the airport? Emily pulled on her friend's arm. No, you don't want to do that, Rubes. This is about you getting over Tyler and what he did to you. I did that last night at the reception when I ate half our wedding cake. The lemon layer only, though. I wanted all lemon cake, and Tyler had insisted on alternating layers of strawberry, lemon, strawberry, lemon. He didn't even seem to care. I was allergic to strawberries. Well, real strawberries, right? Not strawberry flavoring. Ruby sighed a big, exaggerated sigh. It was the principle of it. He didn't seem to care at all that I couldn't eat strawberries, that I loathe them. True, that wasn't very considerate of him. The taxi driver rolled down his window and lit a cigarette. He must have sensed his two female passengers weren't going anywhere anytime soon. A cool November breeze blew into the car and carried the smoke inside. Emily sneezed. Ruby shivered. It's going to be warm in Cozumel, right? Emily smiled brightly. See, we are going to have the time of our lives. Caribbean, here we come. The former bride shook out her cinnamon locks and stepped onto the pavement in her 4-inch espadrille wedges. The driver stubbed out his cigarette in the ashtray sitting on the front passenger seat and leapt into action. Before Emily could join her friend, the burly driver had set their luggage on the sidewalk. Thanks so much, Ruby paid the driver with cash from her reception's money tree. I'm spending every dime of this on you and me this trip, Em. She flashed an envelope full of 50s and 100s. Even Tyler's family, at least the ones who hadn't slunk away in shame after the wedding had been called off, had given Ruby cash. Consolation prize of sorts. You don't have to do that, Emily collected her single bag, packed only for a few days in Tampa, and headed toward the terminal entrance. A line of couples had gathered to be screened before moving further into the building, where they'd drop their luggage and have their documents scrutinized. Ruby whipped out the handle of her large roller bag, 3 times the size of what Emily had, and caught up to her friend. "I want to do it. Don't say another word about it." The 2 women joined the long line of newlywed couples and filed inside. A young couple in matching yellow T-shirts with bride and groom printed in blue lettering smiled as Emily and Ruby queued up behind them and waited for screening. "Oh, hello there," gushed the woman in the bride T-shirt. "I love that this cruise is open to all newlyweds." She elbowed her new husband in the ribs. "Isn't that right, Tim? Love is love." Tim gawked at Ruby and Emily. He seemed particularly flabbergasted at the sight of beautiful Ruby. Most men were, but in this case he had an added level of surprise. Emily blushed at the misinterpretation. "Oh, no, we're not. I mean, she and me, we're just..." Ruby butted in. "Oh, thank you so much. We're super excited, aren't we, honey?" She hugged her best friend tightly to her side. Too tightly. Emily didn't know how to respond. Her mouth gaped open and no words came out. "We've always wanted to go to Cozumel, and when we saw the advertisement for the newlyweds only cruise, well, we couldn't pass it up, and it was such a great deal." Emily couldn't believe Ruby would want to create such a deception. Was this how they were going to act for the next 10 days? Tim replied, "Yes, a really great deal. Nice to meet you both." He seemed relieved when the cruise employee called him and his wife forward. "Toodles!" The bride wiggled her fingers at them in a supremely feminine wave and plopped her oversized bag on the table before she walked through the metal detectors. Emily took the opportunity to hiss at her friend. "What do you think you're doing?" Ruby made a mew. "I really didn't want to tell them about my day yesterday. I couldn't bear the thought of it. Everyone's so happy." She gestured to the crowd of honeymooners, including a few other gay couples in line. "Who wants to hear a story about a jilted bride? It would make everyone feel sorry for me, and nobody feels sorry for Ruby Evers. Nobody." She spoke the last few words with fervent conviction. As the screeners beckoned them forward, Emily mulled over her friend's words. Although she didn't like to deceive people, she also didn't want her friend to be emotionally tortured for a second time. If she'd confessed to Tim and his bride that Ruby's fiancé had left her at the altar, the news would probably spread around the ship in no time. The sympathetic looks and sad whisperings would take away from the fun of the trip they wanted to have. "I understand that, Rubes." She squeezed her friend's hand. "I guess I don't mind letting people think what they want." Ruby smiled and sashayed through the metal detectors. When Emily joined her on the other side, she added, "But I'm not going to be doing any fake kissing or whatever to keep up appearances. Let's agree that we will keep our reasons to ourselves why we're on this cruise. We don't need to announce anything. Agreed?" Ruby grabbed her bag from the table. "Agreed." A smartly dressed cruise employee wearing navy blue slacks and a crisp white shirt with a name tag that read Stan approached them with a tablet. "Names, please?" "Ruby Evers and Emily Small." Ruby gave the man a 1,000-watt smile. Stan down scrolled. "I don't have either of you on the list." He looked up from his tablet with a frown. "Tickets, please?" Ruby showed him a QR code on her phone. A couple who had passed through the same security line squeezed by them to engage with another cruise employee who waved them forward to prevent a backup of passengers. Ruby looked over her shoulder at the growing line of cruisers. Their problem was causing a delay and attracting undue attention. Worry lines marred her perfectly smooth, perfectly spray-tanned brow. Stan took a quick snapshot of the QR code with his tablet. "Oh, Ruby Hardy and Tyler..." He stared hard at Emily. Ruby leaned in and whispered to the man. "Tyler won't be coming on the cruise. I called late yesterday. I had a substitution. The cruise line said it would be okay. They promised it wouldn't be a problem." Emily could hear the tears coming on. "Please, sir, do we have to do this here?" People were starting to stare as Ruby sniffed and rubbed her nose. More couples walked around them. Cruise employees stepped further away from the security line to give passengers room to pass. "I'm sorry, miss, I don't see your name on the list." Stan didn't seem to enjoy the problem the 2 women were causing either. "You'll have to go talk to my manager." He pointed to a tall, thin black woman in a navy suit jacket wearing a name tag that read Sylvia. Ruby sniffed once more and then rolled her massive suitcase toward Sylvia. Emily followed behind. Her stomach twisted. Maybe their plan wasn't going to work as easily as they thought. She'd bent over backward to make her revenge honeymoon plan work, and now it was falling apart. An inner fire grew inside her. She would make this cruise happen for the both of them, no matter what. No matter who she had to step on, no matter who she had to swear at, her best friend was going to have the cruise of a lifetime. She'd make damn sure of it. Emily ran smack into a man who'd crossed in front of her. A tallish, muscular, oh so attractive and hurt man. The kind of man women only dreamed of existing in the real world. The kind of man she'd only seen in magazines and Google searches for hot man photos when she was lonely on a Saturday night without a date. She tripped over his roller bag and crashed to the hard concrete floor. Fantasy ripped away. He kept walking towards Sylvia. She'd been so unnoticeable, he'd crashed into her as if she were a post or a trash can. "Excuse you," she muttered under her breath. Ruby, who'd reached Sylvia before the hottest man in the room, gasped at her friend sprawled out on the floor. "Are you okay?" The man, whose Emily wanted to despise, but who made her stomach turn flip-flops by merely taking in the sight of his tight ass and blue plaid form-fitting shorts, noticed Ruby. The same as every man noticed Ruby. She was absolutely 100% never not noticeable. Beyonce could walk in the room, and Ruby would still draw all male attention her way. "Excuse me?" He had a bewildered look on his face, an "are you talking to me" kind of face that most men had when even a single word came out of Ruby's ruby lips. Ruby gave him a hard stare, rushed to Emily's side, and helped her up. "What happened?" Within seconds, Mr. Gorgeous was in deep conversation with Sylvia. He'd bumped them out of line. But what good would it do to put up a fuss? Ruby already was humiliated and embarrassed they hadn't been able to sail onto the ship like everyone else. "Oh, nothing. It was an accident." Emily brushed her mussed hair out of her eyes and checked her knees and elbows for scrapes. No blood. That was good, but her backside sure ached from making contact with the concrete. "Oh, you poor thing." Ruby gave her shoulders a squeeze. "Let's hope our luck improves. I don't know if I can handle one more bad thing happening." Emily glanced at Mr. Gorgeous. Everything about him was perfect. Perfect hair, longish but not too long, dark and slightly wavy, eyes of an indiscernible color but mysterious and sexy, a well-defined jawline with a scruff of beard, a purposeful scruff that looked as if it never was shaved and never grew longer, a fit physique, wide shoulders, bulked-up arms, sculpted chest under a clinging linen shirt. Some lucky young woman managed to score a prize when she married this fine specimen. Even though his manners left something to be desired, perhaps his wife didn't mind as long as she got to stare across the breakfast table every morning while he drank his coffee and ate his eggs. Then she thought of Ruby's Tyler, also a fine specimen, also physically perfect in almost every way, but his affections for Ruby had been hot 1 minute, cold the next. Although Ruby's best friend, she had thought it not her place to speak ill of him. Ruby had been smitten from the very first date. She could have had her pick of men, and Tyler had a choice. So Emily had assumed a lot about the kind of man Ruby had been looking for. When he'd proposed, Emily did have a few stray thoughts about her friendship with Ruby would likely cool before too long. Tyler had made it clear he didn't think much of Ruby's friends and definitely didn't warm up to Emily. Emily surveyed the packed space. She wanted to see if she could figure out who Mrs. Gorgeous could be. Probably tall, probably blonde, probably a model. "I'm sorry I'm late," Mr. Gorgeous was saying to Sylvia. "I tried to be here at 8, but I couldn't find a taxi, and my plane was delayed last night." Emily's ears perked up. He said nothing of a wife.